Welcome to Perimenopausal Athletes and Beyond, a series where we have 5 experts, including myself, Tennille Hoogland, who are asking really the questions of within the zone of genius for which these experts come in. And today I have the beautiful Becca McConville. And thank you so much, Rebecca, for coming on.
My pleasure. Obviously, when we start talking about REDs and performance and women's health, I can talk all day long. But I won't.
Oh, well, I'm going to try to keep it, contained. But this is something when we even say REDs. Okay, so what we're talking about today, everybody, is something called Relative Energy Deficiency in sport. And it's the overlooked and the forgotten group. And so this is where Rebecca really, really comes into her just years. And I'm going to ask her, it's like, how did you come into this? But this is where her zone of genius is. So I'm going to just share a little bit more about Rebecca here. Okay, I love doing this. She has an MS, RD, LDN, RSSD. her acronym go on and on.
Yeah.
In any case, what you need to know is that she's board certified sports specialist and eating disorder dietitian supervisor. So not only is she have a private practice in which she's supporting athletes specifically, she's also a consultant to the University of Missouri, Kansas City Athletics. The Kansas City Ballet, super cool.
Previously. Yeah.
All right, she stepped back a little bit from there, but this is what she's previously done. She is local colleges and also worked previously with the Kansas City Chiefs. Is what kind of team is the Kansas? Forgive me for not knowing.
NFL.
They're the NFL. Oh, see. In any case, it's the NFL. Go Kansas. I don't know. All I know is go hook 'em horns. I lived in Austin. In any case, that's not Kansas. Becca is also, and this is awesome. So Becca is the author of Finding Your Sweet Spot: How to Avoid Red S by Optimizing Your Energy Balance. And if there wasn't a reason before to come on to the VIP session, which is on January 26th, there is certainly another reason. And that's because Rebecca has shared the whole book with us. So if you come and join and support the She Is team, a non-for-profit organization hoping to continue keeping girls in sport for the long term and owning their journey beyond understanding their results, then this is what you like. There is so many reasons to be part of this discussion, but this is just another. So I was able to get access to this book, and honestly, it is thorough. It gives you the detail. And if you're interested in anything that we say today, then go and take a read. Okay, so that was my just FYI, everybody. So finally, I want to also point you to one more other thing, and that is that Rebecca is a co-host of a podcast called Fit for a Queen, devoted to female athletes. I was looking at the number of amazing discussions that are being had in that and for a number of years. And I really encourage you to go onto it, get to know some of the work she's doing, and most importantly, share it with those female athletes, whether it's in your age group or for somebody else that you know that might be younger in their development journey of sport. And finally, you have something coming up, and that's in 2022. You're going to release a workbook that's co-authored, and it's called At Last: Life After Sport and Team, which is also really fascinating because a lot of us, some of us athletes are in that life after sport, but still doing sport. And what a journey it was for me.
And for a lot, hence why we're doing the workbook.
Oh man, it is huge. So really exciting that you're doing this work. Okay, have I missed anything? Because I know it was quite an intro, but I really wanted to share.
I just love what I do, so I've got my hands all over the place.
It's true. So let's come and hone in on how did you begin, or why did you become interested initially in this area specifically of Red S and working with female athletes?
So I think like many of us, we kind of hone in on stuff that we have a natural interest to or something that we related to. And when I was a college athlete, very driven, obviously, was trying to pursue a starting position, and like many, that drive turned into destruction. I took a little too far, was doing too much training, was eating too perfect, and then ended up kind of having all the cluster of symptoms that I got missed, like, lost my period for a while, was anemic, had an injury that wasn't healing. But each one of these went to somebody different, and nobody collaboratively looked at all these different flags that I had. And I just felt like, I think the more education that's relatable that's out there, and teaching the athlete to listen and know what their body is trying to tell them, then we might prevent or have less duration of these symptoms before they get help.
I completely understand, is why I'm a coach now as well. I mean, I didn't have my period for a number of years, and 5 different nutritionists later, nobody was putting it together. And what we know now is so different than what we knew back then. But where we go with this is understanding, like, first of all, for this audience, many don't even have a grasping of what do we even mean by when we talk about relative energy deficiency in sport, and whether it's actually a concern for us. I mean, isn't it just for elite, is what a lot of people say. I was like, well, I'm not doing that much. Or that's for the younger population. Is this something that we need to be aware of for athletes in perimenopause, or just prior and the ones in beyond?
Oh, I think probably even more, because when the athlete, whether it's professional, collegiate, they have lots of people monitoring them. When somebody is a competitive recreational athlete, they don't. And so there's a lot longer duration before somebody picks it up, or they even bring it up, or at all. Then when you look at areas that kind of get missed by stereotypes, so the perimenopausal and menopausal athlete, that's a big one, because it used to be called the female athlete triad. Now it's called REDS. But the biggest thing that got the attention was the menstrual cycle. Well, even before that point, 50% of female athletes are on birth control. So we're using a marker that we missed a huge group that's not an accurate source. Then when we lose that menstrual cycle going through peri or postmenopausal, we need to still address the fact that it can be a concern, and help these female athletes perform until they're 90 or 100 years old. I want to be the fabulous woman that they show with the big sunglasses that's out like running, doing life at 100, and they say #goals.
Oh my goodness. I love that. Like, let's come into that. So that idea that we can keep going, and the way that we keep going is by paying attention to this very question that we are asking today. So can you go a little bit, just a tiny bit deeper into when you talk about all the different intersections of RED-S? So it's not just about your period, but where else is it showing up? So what are those different pieces?
Any organ system that requires energy can have dysfunction. So the way that this works, if I can just kind of give a little bit of a definition, is it's the energy deficit, but the definition really should be making sure that you have energy available for all the systems in your body, whether mental or physical, because the body will prioritize the fueling for the training, and then everything else gets the leftovers. So if you don't have enough, then it starts slowing down things like digestion or bone health or bone development. And I think for a lot, they're like, well, I'm done growing. Why does that matter? Well, we have the inner matrix of our bone that's constantly recycling and trying to strengthen. And especially for the peri and postmenopausal athlete, that's very important that we continue to rebuild that. It could be even our brain. I often joke, like, our food creates neurotransmitters, and neurotransmitters make our mood. So there's a direct lineage between what we're eating and how we feel, how we interact, how we're present with people, your heart. So Dr. Schufel in California has some of the coolest look at actually heart disease in women, and those that have had amenorrhea earlier in life, and how we start to see changes in the vascular of heart health. So as you can hear, there's a lot of things that can be impacted, whether you're intentionally or unintentionally underfueling.
And what's amazing about what you just said, and what I really want to hone in on, is when we think about the symptoms or the experiences of perimenopause, they hit us all over. They hit us, with mood, fatigue, digestion. And it's something that in one of the I do a 5-day series as well, in which I'm sharing information. And it's like, where are all these places that are completely overlapping? And is it perimenopause or is it low energy availability? And to helping our bodies, thrive. And that's where we have to get really curious. Hey.
Absolutely. And are you hindering your body's ability to get through this transition by underfueling, when we know that the cultural messages are so strong, putting this fear in women of like fighting the aging, fighting the menopause, when it's a natural progression that every woman is going to go through? And they don't have to fear that. And they don't have to fear it's the end of the life as they know it, doing things that they love or celebrating their body. When we know, especially in endurance events, the postmenopausal, perimenopausal group is one of the largest growing groups in endurance sports right now, which is cool. But the science is way lagging for them to support them.
That's super interesting. So can we define, the way that we've defined athlete within this series is anybody who deliberately or intentionally puts exercise into their day. Within that realm, okay, and I'm going to actually say one more thing about this athlete, is that I'm going to propose that as a woman or female athlete in perimenopause and beyond, we all need to be doing strength work, and we all need to be doing some intensity work to keep our heart health going. So that would be the intention of the athletes that we have. Now, when you talk specifically about this low energy availability, I still want to hone in and really come into this space of, who is this for? Is it only for those that are doing endurance sports, such as triathlon, cycling, or is it for, anybody who deliberately puts exercise into our day need to be cued in that this is something that we may need to pay attention to?
Absolutely. And even if maybe they're walking around, they have it active. If you are expending more through movement in motion, more than you're taking in, that is a low energy availability state. And I think especially those that are planning it in with some sort of planned outcome, whether it's strength, whether it's health, whether it's performance, there's such confusing messages that are out there. There's not really a whole lot of accurate information until people have platforms like you do, where experts can come on. And so they really get lost in the weeds.
Yeah. And I think what's one of the things that I want you just to come back to a point that you said earlier, is that we're really lagging in the science. And one thing that what kind of bugs me, and I know it's just because the science isn't there, is that whenever we talk about this very important issue, we still are pointing to the studies that are of the elite professional or high performance athletes that have it. I don't know of, and I'm asking, do you know of, how do we even have the supporting evidence to demonstrate that how much of an issue this actually may be for the perimenopausal and beyond athlete population?
No, I mean, I think that's why Dr. Stacy Sims right now is actually starting research in this area, because there is nothing that is out there. I do know, I'm doing an injustice because of the dietitian there, that I do know that there's a master's athlete nutrition guide that just got released. That's on my book wish list. That's one of the first ones to actually speak specifically to nutrition guidelines for masters, which is crazy because they actually define masters as 35 and older. That's another huge age span that you're trying to lump some guidelines into.
Well, and realistically, when I talk about being in the perimenopausal phase, I am talking about 35 plus, because perimenopause and most doctors don't think of perimenopause when you come in at the age of 35 and you have all these things, because it's not common, but it still can start as early as 35, and we need to prepare I want to get as many people as young as 35 to start understanding some of these things. So with that, that's a beautiful like segue into, let's talk about that early perimenopausal population that may still be having a cycle. And we, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they talk about the cycle as being your fifth vital sign. Mm-hmm. So we know that's one of the, like having your cycle, but more specifically ovulating in your cycle is one of the beautiful things. And you referred to this earlier in the interview. Are there other things that we can, as if you're cycling or, that really kind of come into what we want to pay attention to? Like you've mentioned it, mood, but is there any more that you can say about that kind of red flags? Let's get into this.
Blood work is always kind of a more black or white one too. So if you're looking at like, do you continue to have iron deficiency, anemia, vitamin D issues? Are we seeing things within like your white blood cell count? All of those need energy and replacing for them to be sufficient. The other part too is if they are deficient, I call that like the domino effect. They will actually create, like iron, for example, when somebody is deficient, creates an anaerobic state, which actually requires more energy to do the work. So it actually makes the energy deficit state worse. Mm-hmm. They also will start to perpetuate thyroid function, which then will hinder bone and metabolism as well. So you have crosstalk that's always occurring within the body when the brain senses a low energy state. I also want to clarify something real quick. That's one of the biggest keys. When I say low energy state, people seem to think like very, very restrictive diets. The literature actually speaks that can start at a deficit of 250 to 400 calories. That's skipping your afternoon snack. That's skipping your recovery nutrition. It could just be slowly changing your portion sizes that creates that. So I will have them walk me through head to toe. So if they have heart rate data that they're using off a watch, have they noticed any trends or changes with that? And also with their exertion and their activity. If they have a coach, I may ask, what kind of feedback are you getting from your coach? Are you noticing changes with digestive patterns or the changes in your stool, bloating, fullness, hunger, all of those? Okay, check yes or no, and we kind of go through there. Sleep quality is a big one too. Are they waking up more at night? Are they finding it harder to get to sleep? Injury, looking at resiliency within training. Are they having more common what we call overtraining injuries like tendonitis? Obviously the bone injuries as well. Mm-hmm. I could keep going and going, but as you can see, you just kind of trickle along in the body. And if they've started to make changes with their nutrition, or if there's been a bump in training that they have not increased their nutrition for, then you can usually help them put those puzzle pieces together. Like, oh, I didn't even think about the fact that when I started adding my additional day of strength training, I didn't increase my nutrition, and all of a sudden I had troubles with going to the bathroom.
That's so amazing. Yeah, I do see that quite a bit, is that we get into such a rhythm with our bodies. And I guess this would be a question, is you change your training slightly and your body still is like on this clock. We know the strength of a circadian rhythm within our bodies. It's on this clock of like, yeah, but you don't normally eat at this time. So you don't have that hunger. So you're not actually thinking about it. Is some of the risks that we don't get hungry, and it's almost like, no, you've got to listen more to the numbers than the body in some cases when it's hard to keep up.
100%. And there's kind of two different ways that can happen. Is either those hunger signals at first will kind of get muffled, and then eventually will actually shut off. It's a way that the body can continue to preserve energy. But what does our culture tell us? Only eat when you're hungry. But it's like the bear in the cave. If the bear is hibernating, it's not going to be thinking to go out and eat. It's going to slow everything down and make it go to sleep.
Yeah.
which what happens when you're kind of chronically dieting or unintentionally underfueling. The other thing is when somebody has a diet that's full of lots of high fiber and voluminous foods, it gets in the stomach, it swells. And so our stomach has receptors that line it and it tells the brain, hey, you're full. The problem is there's not enough caloric energy there. So then they're hungry maybe 2 hours later, but they're like, well, I already ate. And so they get this fake fullness. It also tends to disrupt sex hormones because there's actually linkage from that in our digestive tract and colon. So we will see more menstrual dysfunction with high fiber diet. So you're exactly right. Where sometimes I often do a lot of reframing with my clients I work with and be like, okay, if it was 2 o'clock in the morning and you were laying in bed and you weren't tired, you wouldn't just be like, oh, okay, I guess I'm not going to sleep today. You would try
Mm,
to lay in bed and make yourself go to sleep because you acknowledge like something's off. I still need to be sleepy. Or same thing, if you didn't have thirst, you wouldn't be like, gosh, I guess I'm not going to drink anything today. You would still go in, hydrate. So we need to look at that in context of our food as well.
so yeah, it's so interesting. Can we come back to the sleep piece a little? So because I think that is like, there's so many points that you just made, and I know that I'm gonna have like missed some of the questions that I like that are just popping up in my brain like this. So the sleep piece is really interesting because one of the things that we in perimenopause and sometimes in the beyond as well, we have this difficulty in staying asleep, this 2 to 3 o'clock, and some care providers recommend that we actually have some protein or some, slow, not a real, no sugar, like not as much sugars, but a protein and some fat before we go to bed. And so then I'm like, okay, but that increases our blood glucose. And then how do we, and I'll just say one more thing. And I remember when I was young too, I was always told like, yeah, through the recovery, that's when when you're sleeping, the growth hormone was there. And that's when your muscles are going to really come into, being stronger. So have that protein shake. Are these rules still applying to us? Like, how does this actually work now that we're aging and our insulin response is slower at night?
Mhm.
It is decreasing. Our blood sugars are going up because we age. That's just a thing. And how do we think about this to stay in our best health, but also know how to manage this fueling and the symptoms?
Sure. Now I'll speak. I am not an expert in the physiological states that occur in menopause. However, when you look at that, so many things are linked. So like, metabolism is related to our body temperature, and blood sugar is a driver of that. So the protein and fat is more keeping blood sugar stable during that big dip that occurs between 2 to 3 in the morning. So you talked about circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
We have big dips that occur when we're sleeping at 2 and 3, and then actually 3 to 4 in the afternoon, which is why when people are like, oh, I broke my diet and went to the vending machine, that's because their blood sugar dropped, they're hungry. So growth hormone does secrete at its peak when we're asleep. So specifically casein in the protein is supposed to be what's most responsible for supporting the secretion of growth hormone and helping your muscles to repair and heal. But we can have all this science that sounds all great. I always tell people, just try it. Try something for 3 days, see how you feel. 3 days is enough that we can say, once a coincidence, twice, maybe 3 times if it's working, leave it alone. Then maybe try something different for 3 days and figure out I would joke, figure out what your body's secret sauce is and then leave it alone.
So, okay. So this is coming into a really important point, and let's hammer this one home. All right.
Oh boy.
You are an individual. Like at the end of the day, your advice has come into this, like how your expertise, I want to say, not advice, your expertise and knowledge in the science and working in this every single day as your passion. Let's start to look at your body. let's understand what's happening in your body and how you're going to not just feel, because we can't always just come into a feeling, oh, I'm hungry. Like that's a really important piece
Mm-hmm.
of knowing that that isn't always a trustworthy sign. Darn it, right? It's like we say, always say like, trust your body, but sometimes we actually need to understand what it is we're taking on so we can support our body. And or the injury, like you went through a whole list of things that we need to do. And then if you're having a challenge, then try something 3 days. That's part of it. And work with your healthcare provider, your dietitian, your registered dietitian, your doctor, whomever it is that you're seeing to support your body.
Right. I love this saying, you know, I may be the expert of this science, but you're the expert of you. So let's figure out what that signal your body is trying to tell you and what to do with it as well. Because, like you said, hunger isn't always a sign. I always talk about that. There's physical hunger and emotional hunger, and they can sometimes really feel the same. But we have to
Mm.
sort out what your body is trying to tell you to do with that and not just give it a blanket answer.
Hmm. This reminds me, there's so many different ways of coming into an awareness uh, of how do we eat. I mean, there's 20 million diets out there that are trying to help support you. And this isn't about finding, there might be a diet out there that actually is totally gel with your body, maybe, but it's about figuring that piece out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to just come into a slightly different question here. And that is, and it's related in the sense of trying to understand how we fuel. So I know, like many of my athletes, myself included, like when I get up in the morning and I just have an easy run or just a walk the dogs, this idea of fueling for training, like we get really hung up on this idea, like we got to fuel for training. Are we putting ourselves at risk in this fasting state if we don't always feel like eating right before a low intensity session versus like a high intensity session? Can we get away with this, or is this actually one of the major places that we might have to say, you know what, that's the time that you need to eat before every single time you move your body, particularly after you've had a fasted state of sleep?
You know, not necessarily unless somebody is in a volatile state, meaning they're coming back from an injury, or if we're trying to correct reds, they do need to fuel. If you have been doing your proper nutrition foundation, your body is resilient. It has the stores that are there for you to do the training that you need to do, and you don't have to have something before you go out. But also, that goes back to that person. Let's say that they want to not have their stomach growling when they're going to do their training or go for a walk. They might just want something light in their stomach. Or if they want to do a higher intensity work, or I have some that comment, when they strength train in a fasted state, they get kind of nauseous. So they want to be able to have a little bit of something before they go and lift. Goes back, I'm going to sound like a broken record, and I'm sure I'm going to annoy the people that listen to it, but play around with it. See what works for you. If it leaves you feeling great by the end and there's no negative consequences, then leave it alone, even if it doesn't seem standard practice.
That gives a lot of freedom.
That's what I hope.
But people, I think that I say people like it's like this, like out there, but I think that it is a really valuable thing to take on. Is we have the freedom to be curious. We have the freedom to figure out what can work. And we have also to really come into understanding and listening to what our body is continuously telling us with the signals that it provides.
I always share this funny story. Years ago, I was doing a race. I think it was a half marathon. And there was this older gentleman in front of me. And you know how the back pockets, they're mesh so you can see through. He had like probably 5 miniature Snickers bar. And he would pull out and he would eat one. And he'd put his wrapper back. And I'm going to confess, I was being judgmental. I was like, oh my God, doesn't he know there's better products that he can use? He could goo. I can't believe he's eating a candy bar. Couple miles later, he pulls another one. And then it finally clicked on me. Who am I to judge when I've been trying this whole time to pass him and I can't keep up with him and he's slowly pulling ahead of me. So whatever he's doing is working for him and I just need to shut up.
Oh, it is so perfect. It is so great because sometimes the sugar is just what you need. This brings me to a point of clean eating. You talked about earlier this idea of, and you've mentioned a few times, this idea of, a big salad. Like when I so remember coming into a space, it was a home and it was my first training camp away. And I was with all these professional athletes that had been, going for a long time and they were doing this and they all ate salads for dinner. Salads. That was it. And so this was the beginning of my demise. In any case, we want to equate this idea of eating clean with eating enough but I eat so well. Can you talk just a tiny bit about, like, into your Snickers bar point, like sometimes we just need to get it down.
Mm-hmm.
And a Snickers bar, if you have the nourishment, maybe like that's going to be okay. Because a sugar is a sugar at the end of the day. So can you talk a little bit about that risk of like all that fiber you were talking about and making us feel full, but actually not providing enough for us?
Sure. So it's twofold. You miss the mark nutritionally. I have a lot of sayings because it's just the way I talk to people, but you don't want stuff in your stomach that's taking up space and not paying rent. So if that gets in the way of you getting enough carbs, protein, fat, because you have a lot of high fiber, voluminous foods, then you're going to end up with some sort of deficient state and you're going to be full all the time. So that goes back to that. I don't have a hunger signal, therefore I shouldn't be eating. But probably what's most important is the moral judgment that comes around clean eating, just simply by the term of itself. Because then if you eat something that's not on it, like a Snickers bar, then you're like, oh my God, have I been bad? Is this going to lead to a horrible run tomorrow? Or am I going to have this dreaded, postmenopausal weight loss that people talk about if I eat off the plan or if I don't eat perfectly? And so that's where we see this risk of disordered eating. And, obviously being somebody who is an expert in REDS, but also an expert in eating disorders, that group is also vastly overlooked when it comes to that risk because of the pressures that they face. So I always approach food in a neutral way. So they stay curious, they find what works for them, and have your salad, but make sure you're eating enough of the other stuff with it. I love salads. I have a salad almost every night, but it's loaded with all sorts of goodies in it. And I have my main entree as well.
Mm-hmm. You're pointing to something that's interesting that you said, that you don't want to have so much of one thing, fiber, for example, that puts the balance of other macronutrients such as fat and protein out of balance. A lot of the literature that I'm reading has women in perimenopause and beyond eating a ton more protein.
Mm-hmm.
And that is satiating. It takes a lot of work for our bodies to get that much, digest that much, and deal with that much. And so I know that this isn't an area particular of your study in perimenopause and beyond specifically, but do you see that in any of your clients that are really trying to bring up that protein amount and then struggling with the overall amount as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that goes from, okay, if the literature is speaking that you need to have this many grams of protein and we need to work on our timing windows, we'll set that up as a foundation, but then I'll have them go back and be like, look, if maybe you're supposed to aim for 40 grams in a recovery window and it's really hard, and then you find yourself craving carbohydrates an hour later, can we just move that to 30? And then maybe add a little bit more carb and see how you feel, so that we're working with the big picture, trying to go with that recommendation, but seeing what their body will strive at its best. Because we're having some research, but we don't have longevity in research to say how this is going to work for somebody who's training, peri or postmenopausal, trying to also feed their kids and family and going to work. It's not just about protecting muscle. We have to look at the human being.
Amen. So there has been a lot in this interview.
I know. Wow, we went around the world and back twice.
Welcome to Interviews with Tennille Hoogland, because I just love to, these are all the things that like, at least like I know that I face in answering a lot of the questions and trying to guide my own athletes in a nutritional sense and make sure that we have the questions to ask experts like yourself. So that's how we come into this space. And is there anything, is there anything that we haven't talked about? No. But like, is there particular something that you want to share with this group of incredible athletes that are wanting to be like yourself, and being that I love that you had your sunglasses on and you're old and you're continuing to go, because that's what we want. We want to keep going. We want to know that we can. Is there anything else that we've missed?
I think I can sum it up with one simple statement or question, is to ask yourself, is what I'm doing working? A lot of times when people reflect, they're like, yeah, or no, actually it's not.
And to kind of trust that the answer and the knowing that you have within yourself to know whether it's working or not, whether you have that trust in there.
Right.
And if you don't, well, then let's ask more questions.
You bet.
And we've given a lot to you. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for coming on and sharing this expertise. And I encourage all of you, if you've enjoyed this interview, then you want the book. This is just the glimmer of some of the information that is provided within this book. So do join and come into the VIP, come in and ask questions, because it's going to be a really dynamic panel. I know that to be true. And we've got wonderful people all sharing their zone of genius. So thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.